The inmates run this prison. Located in La Paz, Bolivia, sits a prison unlike any in the world. A place where murderers, thieves, and sex offenders are left to govern themselves. This is San Pedro Prison, and today we will be looking at this fascinating place that operates much more like a deviant city than a prison. Let's start with the initiation process a prisoner will go through on his first day at San Pedro. Don't expect a welcoming committee with a tray of tropical drinks at this place. Initiation process. If you were unfortunate enough to be sentenced to a stay in San Pedro, you can expect a short booking procedure with the police in Bolivia before a much longer and violent initiation process by your fellow prisoners. After having your fingerprints and mugshots taken, you will be walked into the prison's gates by an officer. Risking certain personal injury, the officer will not enter the prison. You will be pushed through the gate where you will be at the mercy of the delegatos. The delegatos are the bosses of the prisons and decide everything. Where you will be staying, what you will be eating, who you can or can't talk to, and most importantly, how you will be paying. That's right, at San Pedro you pay for everything, starting with an entry fee of approximately $21 US, a hefty fee considering the country's average salary is $6 a day. You are also expected to pay for your room, food, and clothing. And you thought your hotel room's mini fridge was a ripoff. Based on the crimes you have been convicted of, the delegatos will decide where to place you in the prison and what type of work you will be doing. Sex offenders are at the bottom of the hierarchy and are often murdered upon entry to the prison or punished to complete the most remedial and humiliating tasks. It is not uncommon for newcomers to be forbidden to speak or to suffer severe beatings. And no, they don't offer late checkout or room service. Now let's take a look at the layout of this prison. Layout. San Pedro is a city within a city, split into 8 housing sections. The prisoners that occupy each of these communities are primarily based on the money they have to pay for added luxuries. The higher-end communities houses the delegatos and wealthier inmates. If you can afford it, you can even buy a luxury cell that may include 3 floors and a hot tub. A famous trafficker known as Redbeard even paid for a second-floor extension on his cell so he could have a better view. The wealthiest area is known as La Posta. Inmates here are provided with private bathrooms, a kitchen, and cable TV. The cost to purchase one of these luxury cells can be as high as $30,000. With such amenities as billiards, poker, restaurants, and a football pitch, the inmates in La Posta live like royalty. On the opposite side of the spectrum, the lower-end communities are riddled with drug dealers and sex offenders. These sections are extremely dangerous, and stabbings often occur. If you can't afford a place to sleep, you will have to bed down in one of the numerous hallways or corridors. Here, you can expect to be victimized and possibly die of exposure. At 3,600 meters above sea level, the temperatures at San Pedro drop rapidly at night. Rated 1 star on Yelp, would not recommend. Common areas at San Pedro are mostly considered safe during the day. A microcosm of larger society, San Pedro has food markets, clothing stores, restaurants, and even a pool. A sense of normalcy takes over as inmates and their families go about their daily tasks. You heard that right, the wives and children of the inmates often stay inside the prison. Let's take a closer look at these women that are a testament to Tammy Wynette's song, Stand By Your Man. Women and children in San Pedro. Although it may not be a sprinkle the rose petals and light the candles type situation, the women that accompany their men in San Pedro are a vital part of this micro-society. They are a much-needed connection to the outside world, providing the prison with food, building materials, clothing, and medicine. The wives and girlfriends often help their partners meet the financial requirements of staying in San Pedro by operating small business, such as washing laundry or selling crafts to tourists. Yeah, tourists. We'll get to that later. There are over 400 children accompanying their mothers in San Pedro prison. Each morning, groups of children can be seen heading out with their backpacks on to attend school within the prison. They will return to their father's cell after school to do homework and spend time together as a family. San Pedro is a place where human decency is hard to come by. One exception is the respect that women and children receive within the prison. It is an unwritten law that if a child walks past 2 inmates fighting, the fight will be put on pause with each fighter holding their position until the child has passed. Even with the power to pause a fight a la Adam Sandler and Click, San Pedro is no place for a child to grow up. This sparked a movement named Don't Imprison My Childhood that quickly failed due to revolt by the prisoners. Critics were quick to point out that the children are most likely better off inside the prison with their families than outside on their own. Speaking of things that don't belong in a prison, in our next section we are going to explore San Pedro's fascinating guided tours. Yes, that's right, you can find almost anything inside San Pedro's walls except for prison guards, of course. Guided prison tours. Perhaps the most unique part of a very unique place is the history of guided tours that were offered at San Pedro. A 1-hour tour of the prison would cost you $10, with a more authentic package including your own cell, romance, and questionable substances could be purchased for $100. Although tours were officially stopped in 2009 due to a riot, with the money in the right hands, a very adventurous traveler could theoretically still get inside the prison. The most famous tour guide in San Pedro's history was Thomas McFadden, a British Tanzanian who was sentenced to 6 years in the jail after being caught with 5 kilos of cocaine. He started offering guided tours to San Pedro along with selling his customers a homemade batch of the prison's cocaine. At his height, Thomas was guiding as many as 70 customers per day. Word got out and flocks of adventurous Western students made their way to McFadden and San Pedro. Rusty Young was one of those visitors who completed a tour with McFadden. He was so fascinated by McFadden's story he bribed his way into San Pedro. That's right, Rusty Young bribed his way into one of the world's most notorious jails. He spent the next 3 months living with McFadden in San Pedro, learning everything he could about McFadden's story. Rusty Young later published a book titled Marching Powder that tells McFadden's story. In 2017, Rusty returned to Bolivia and San Pedro in the documentary Wild Lands. Since the heydays of McFadden and the drug-fueled tours, it is still business as usual at San Pedro. The tours have just moved outside. Each day, hundreds of tourists can be found in the courtyard outside the prison gates on walking tours. The same type of people that think it is fun to jump off cliffs or swim with sharks are welcome to try and bribe their way into San Pedro. We wouldn't suggest it. The conditions and deficiencies at San Pedro are a consequence of a much larger problem. Bolivia is considered the poorest nation in Latin America by pretty much every measure that exists. 80% of the population in Bolivia live in poverty. With that level of poverty, it's no wonder that San Pedro is left to survive on its own with no government funding. Contrary to the government's official stance that San Pedro is a modern and unique approach to incarceration, it is much more likely that it comes down to a lack of money. There you have it. All of a sudden, a weekend trapped at your in-laws doesn't seem too bad, does it? Until next time, stay free.